Everyone, we're live. So Mr. Davis, whenever you want to start. It's 8:28 a.m. right now.
I will start the meeting exactly at 8:30, so we have about 2 minutes.
Is Dave just blurry to me?
No, it's my my computer basically somehow has a screen that's not too clear. So
Okay,
as long as you guys can hear me.
good. We can hear you, see you. All right.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 20th. The meeting will start with a roll call of the board members. Director Perotti.
Present.
Thank you. Director McQuarrie.
Here.
Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez.
Present.
Director Sheeler.
Present.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Here.
And Chair Davis is here, so we do have a quorum. Madam Clerk, could we have the report regarding the posting of the agenda, please?
Good morning.
Good
The agenda
morning.
was posted on Friday, October 16th, 2020 at MTD's administrative office, mailed and emailed to those on the agenda list, and posted on MTD's website.
Thank you very much. Just a little note to Pablo. I love the fact that I can see the agenda and everybody in the meeting. It helps a lot to basically run the meeting when I can see everybody with the screen. So thank you for the setup. We'll start with the consent calendar this morning. Item 4 on our agenda, the approval of the prior minutes for the meeting of October 6th, 2020. And item 5, the cash report for the period September 19th through October 9th, 2020. Are there any questions on either of those two items? Paula, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, it's on the cash report. It's 124990 on 10/1/2020 to Sansom Clinic for medical exams. Does that have anything to do with COVID testing, or was that just exams for new drivers?
My assumption at this point would be it's just typical exams that we do with our employees are required to take, but nothing related to COVID, but I can confirm for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Bill? Mr. Sheeler?
Thank you, Chair. I did have one question. It leads to a bigger one, and it's the Mullen and Hensel for the Kai-Real project services. And I was just wondering if there's any sort of running calculation of how much MTD has spent to date on this project since it was resurrected a few years ago.
I don't have that figure in front of me, but we'll be doing reporting out a financial update in November, and we can include that item if you'd like.
I would really appreciate that the specific amount. I don't know how much we've actually budgeted for these costs to start with, and I'd just like to see how things are tracking all along, if possible.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Good. Ms. Rodriguez, Olivia, and then Chuck, and then I'll go to Chuck. Olivia?
Yes, on the cash receipts of accounts receivable, I saw some of the advertising on the buses and I just wanted to know, is advertising up, down, or is it the same based on the pandemic?
It's been down. I don't have the exact figures in front of me. Again, we can include a little more detail in our financial update for the quarter, but we did have to make some contractual arrangements early in March and April and bump a few months for some of our advertisers. So we did what we could to work with them while maintaining long-term revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Director McQuarrie. Chuck?
Yeah, on the accounts receivable, the 300,000 capital reimbursement for TIRCP, I don't recall what that's for.
It sounds like it's a TIRCP reimbursement from the state of California through SBCAG for MTD's facilities master plan.
So it's a reimbursement. We had spent money and then they're paying us back. Is that?
Yes, we handle like most grants work that way, you know, as if it's capital in this case, and that's the way we handle them. Very rarely do you get an advance on grant funding, but this was reimbursement based.
Thank you.
Mr. Sheeler has another question. Bill?
Sorry, this is off the topic. It's just not my eyes being blurry, but my screen has got the agenda in front of me and it's all just very not legible, which isn't a problem because I've got the agenda in front of me. I was just wondering if anybody else, because when I look at other things, my eyes look good, but when I look at the screen, it's like, that's better. Thank you. A little bit better. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm having no problems. If anybody else has any problems, let us know.
Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Olivia Rodriguez.
Okay, motion by Tabor, second by Rodriguez. Roll call vote. Director Perotti. Oh, did I get that, Paula? I can see you say aye with your mouth.
Unmute.
There you go. I can read lips really well. Director McQuarrie. Unmute, Chuck, for the record.
Yes.
Okay, Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez.
Yes.
Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And Chair Davis. So the motion passes 6-0. Very good. Thank you very much. Concluding the consent calendar takes us to item 6, the public comment. Madam Clerk, is there anyone who wishes to speak under public comment on items that are not currently on our agenda?
We have no public comments at this time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Takes us into our first agenda item of presentation. This is item 7, fiscal year 2019-20 annual ridership report. Mr. Estrada, Ms. Blackerby.
Yeah, good morning, Chair Davis, members of the board. I'll be handing this over to Ms. Blackerby pretty quickly. It's our annual ridership report. As you know, the period that we're discussing here is from July 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2020. So it does include the beginning of the pandemic from March, but it also includes a number of months that I think you'll see we were doing fairly well as far as ridership. So the numbers are a bit skewed, but I'll hand it over to Hillary so she can walk you through it and give you the details.
Thank you, Chair and board members. Good morning.
Good morning.
So yeah, we're going to go over the annual ridership report, and like Jerry said, you know, this contains a few months of pandemic, but also about 8.5 months of really good ridership before that. So next slide. So again, this is structured much like our quarterly reports that we've been doing now. It's been a year that we've had 4 quarters of this format, both in the ridership summary report and also in this presentation. So again, the key performance indicators that we look at are ridership by fare category, total passengers, revenue hours and miles, passengers per revenue hour, and passengers per mile. The top 5 lines by ridership, top 5 lines by passengers per hour, some other sort of numbers, and ridership for the university and city college, and then on-time performance. Next slide. So you've seen this before. This was actually in my 3rd quarter report, just sort of reminding ourselves. I know it's, for me anyway, it's hard to place oneself in context when it comes to how fast everything happened in March for us and for, well, the whole world. These were those major milestones. I'm not going to read through them, but essentially you can see when certain schools closed, when we had, our first positive case, when the statewide stay-at-home order was, and that March 19th date is really important. That's when the governor issued the stay-at-home order. It was also the first day that we reduced service, basically reducing the service, suspending service on the 15X and 16 and 28. And then we put line 27 service on an alternate schedule, which is actually a standard schedule that we use, in the summer and other times when the UCSB crowd has waned a bit. So March 19th, we did that. That's also the day we stopped fare collection and instated rear door boarding. A little later, we restricted bus loads to 8 people on a 40-foot bus. That would later go up to 15. And then the first day of our second wave of reductions, which are basically the line 10 plus all our shuttle services, that was April 6th. And that's just good context to know when we start looking at, frankly, both ridership and on-time performance. So next slide. So ridership by fare categories. This is the whole year. And some of these slides I'll show you and I'll say which is which, but it's full fiscal year data all together. And then there will be the 4th quarter, right? Because the whole year, it actually, considering, doesn't look that bad, right? Because we frankly had 3 really strong quarters, or 2, and like I said, January, February, and half of March were all really strong for us. But then we saw, of course, the bottom fall out. So you can see for the whole fiscal year, last fiscal year, or the year before this past, we had 6.4 million passengers, and this past year we had 5.1, or 5 million, a little over 5 million passengers a year. So considering, not that bad on the whole, but as we start to delve into the details, you can see how much of a change we have. And so for the year, we wound up with a 19.9% decrease in ridership. Next slide. Oh, I think Bill might have a question.
Thank you. On that chart, the one that we just went past, the bar chart, there was one category that was other, and there was actually an increase in that. What might have that been?
Other contains free. So since everyone's been marked free since mid-March, that's why that went up. And when you see the quarterly numbers, you'll see it went way up. Good question.
All right.
That was a really good question, Bill, because I had that same question. Thank you. Thanks, Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a question on
Go ahead.
follow up on that?
Olivia.
Is there a reason we didn't put free under other so that there isn't a question about it?
I just didn't, those were the things we'd been tracking. And if you go back one slide, so like, for example, adult has combined the full cash fare, tokens, and adult passes. Students has UCSB, City College, and youth passes. Senior and disabled is seniors, both senior and disabled folks paying cash and passes. And then other has like shuttle, cash, free, which again is normally very negligible. Special pass programs. There might be
Okay, so
one
it's
other.
not just the free category, it's a bit
It's
of
not just
everything
free. Yeah.
then. Okay, I was just wondering if if that's what it was, why won't we label it? Should we
Right.
label it like that?
Hillary, where does the ship categories come in when we have cruise ships come in?
That's shuttle cash. So
That'd be
that's
shuttle
just
cash,
really
and
another
it would come in under other. Okay, great.
Okay,
good question.
thank you.
Okay, next slide. So this is where you can start to see the quarterly numbers. And so looking at fourth quarter total passengers, right? The year prior, it was about 1,669,000 passengers. Quarter four this year, 405,000, right? So you really see it drop off significantly. The revenue hours and revenue miles are down, of course. We've, cut back on service, though the service that we've cut back on isn't so robust. Now, the line 28, that's the lion's share of this reduction, right? Because we were on 10-minute service and we had really significant service there. You can also see in the passengers per revenue hour that goes way down. Of course, we are limiting ourselves to a maximum of 15 people on each bus. And so you can see here that is, of course, has gone down significantly. But for the fiscal year, again, because we were so strong in the first three quarters, for the year, passengers per revenue hour is only 23.4, down from 29.5. Next slide. So for the fiscal year, these are top 5 lines by ridership. This is really common, and this is generally actually on a quarterly basis. These 5 lines compete for the most ridership. So line 11 and line 6 are workhorse lines. Line 28 out of UCSB, line 2 and line 24X. These are our workhorses, and so this is for the whole year. Now, obviously, generally line 28 edges out line 6, but since it wasn't running for, a quarter and a half a month, of course, it went down. But still, even with that, it's still our 3rd highest ridership for the year. And something on this slide I just want to mention, and I'll touch on it later, but of these 5 lines, our top lines by ridership, other than the 28, I'm really proud to say that these other 4 lines throughout the pandemic, we haven't reduced service at all on these, right? And the ridership is not like we're making money off of them right now, but the important thing is we know people take them and we know people need these lines. And so we're really proud to have maintained those service levels, as we can, in fact, even boosting them when we're able. So it's something I think as an agency we can be really proud of, that we know a lot of essential workers take those lines, and they've consistently seen, they've seen consistent ridership throughout the pandemic. So just wanted to mention that. Next slide. So this is just the fourth quarter, and you see, so what's missing, obviously, the 28 wasn't running. But this is where you really see these 5 workhorse lines, 11-6, lines 1 and 2, the east and west side, and line 20, Carpinteria. Line 20 ridership has remained strong, and has been actually doing really great over the past couple of years. And so just for the fourth quarter, these are our numbers, but line 11 is pretty unbeatable at this point. Next slide. Another way to look at it, right, is passengers per hour. And again, this is for the whole fiscal year, even with a whole quarter not running. Line 28 still had 72 passengers per hour. It's pretty amazing. And though it's, currently suspended and on a break, an extended spring break, line 28, we're really happy with that service and what it's meant for the folks out at UCSB and Isla Vista and Goleta. And, you know, we look forward to welcoming it back when the time is right. And again, 27, 39.2. And you see, you know, these are all heavy student serving lines, both City College and UCSB. So that's for the fiscal year. And currently, if you look at this, 4 of these 5 haven't run since March 18th. So next. So fourth quarter, things change, obviously. And you can see here the difference that our top line by passengers per hour in the fourth quarter was the line 2. And so honestly, when you see that it's 12.5 passengers per hour, and you consider that we have 15, only 15 people allowed on the bus, it's pretty good in relative terms. And so you can see, you know, and line 11, it's a little lower, but there's also a lot of hours of service. Next slide. Here are those numbers at a glance. Again, total ridership down 19.9. We say an at capacity load. Those are up 5.2, but 2 full to board is up 159.4%. And you may, if you are, you know, pay close attention to this, you may know that in the past, at capacity loads and 2 full to board loads, those numbers were kind of around the same, or they would track the same. With the current situation, we've really just told drivers, you know, the at capacity doesn't matter as much because the likelihood that you're 2 full to board is really high. So they're more likely to hit that 2 full to board than at capacity, because basically the difference between the two generally is kind of a standing load and then a sardine load, right? So that's sort of the difference. So the 2 full to board is really what we're paying attention to. With wheelchairs boarded, still, you know, over 11,000, that's down 18.9%. So kind of sort of tracks with total ridership. Bicycles, again, when we, if I have the fourth quarter information here, I can look up the number, but for the year, you know, our ridership's down 19.9%, but bikes carried is down only 5.8%. And that's pretty impressive if you think about it. Obviously, we've all heard in the news that bicycles are really having a moment, which is great, and I think is good for transit in the long run. But to see that that's the reduction is pretty impressive. And
Yeah.
some of these sort of monthly numbers you see, it's even just a couple % change. So we're really
Hillary,
proud
I have a
about that.
question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah. And looking at the 2 full to ride chart that you've got, I'm looking at some of the long distance runs like the 6, 11, 20, and the numbers are pretty high. And we've had some complaints about buses not following those that are 2 full to board. And I'm wondering, do we have any buses available that we can do some more boosting so we can cut down on these?
So we are currently boosting. We actually have, I don't have the exact stuff in front of me, but we have boosters running 6 days a week. It's certainly not like a bus is following every bus that gets full. We just don't have the workforce or the fleet, frankly, to make that happen. But those workhorse lines, the 6, 11, 20, 1 and 2, we've been looking at which trips consistently, and we look at this every single day, which trips consistently are having 2 full to board loads, and then building a booster sort of mishmash run that a driver can go do to supplement you know, capacity for those lines and for those trips. So every weekday right now we have at least 2 boosters, and when I say 2, I mean they're doing a full day's work of the different lines that need help. On Saturday we also have 2, and we're looking to add more as we build our build our ranks, right? And as we're hiring. So that's something that we are doing, and people certainly certainly appreciate it when they see another bus coming along behind.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. So here are the numbers on at UCSB and City College. Again, it's not surprising. UCSB down 26.6%, City College down 22%. If you basically notice, it's like it's kind of down a quarter, which makes sense. But the one thing that we don't know data-wise, and this is an important thing to note on that passenger by fare category, normally when people are paying to ride the bus, we know we can get a little bit of information about who's riding, right? They're tapping their student ID, we track that. They're paying with a senior pass or youth pass, we track that. We haven't been able to track any of that since mid-March. So we know, of course, that there are students at UCSB and City College who are riding our buses. We know that. But we can't track it unless we collect fares. And so that's sort of, this is a caveat, this is the asterisk about all this data, is that we're not logging, so we don't know how many seniors are riding. We don't know how many students are actually riding because they're not paying or they're not tapping their card. So I just wanted to mention that because, of course, this skews this year's, it's going to skew next year's, and it's just something that we have to pay attention to. I had thought we were past the years of asterisks after we got past the debris flow and Thomas Fire, but here we are with another year or two of data that takes a little explanation. Next slide. On-time performance. And I apologize, there's a typo. It says 2 line, not 2 lines. Apologies. That drives me wild. So I was very embarrassed that that made this made it into the staff report. So for on-time performance, this is something that it's pretty hard to look at by line for a whole fiscal year because lines change tiers, right? So it really didn't make any sense to show it for the fiscal year, so I'll show you for the fourth quarter. So our mark or our guiding sort of principle and goal is to keep on-time performance above 80% for a line, or basically if it dips below that consistently, we need to take a look at what's going on. I mean, we always take a look, but we need to drill down further. 19 of the 21 lines running in the fourth quarter were above 85%. And I'll note that, you know, on April 6th, we suspended our shuttle routes. So there are 6 days, I think it says in the staff report, but the lines 10 and 37 ran for 4 days in April, and line 36 ran for 6 days. So that data is in here. And the lines that were below 80%, they were between 75 and 79%, were line 10 and line 36. So they had a few, you know, basically you have 4 or 6 days of data that's giving you that red there below 80%. So basically, since April 6th, we've had everything be above 85%. Again, obviously it makes sense. There's been a lot less traffic, but we do think that our work over the past few years with on-time performance has, you know, been bearing fruit this year. Next slide. This is the other thing we look at is system-wide on-time performance by amount of service on the lines. Again, this is for the fourth quarter. So this shows trips. So this is how many trips ran in the fourth quarter. You can see above 85%, it was 71,431. And then below 80, again, 179 trips. And so a trip is, you know, one way end to end. And so that's those, you know, line 36 and line 10. And so not very much that went down. So I know this says 0, but basically 179 is below 0, or below 1% when compared to 71,000. Next slide. So this I was able to do by fiscal year, which is again the system-wide by amount of service, and it shows you that 94% of trips in the fiscal year were above 80% on time, and most of them were much higher than that, in the high 80s or 90s, and then below 80%, just 23,541 trips with 6%. And I believe that's my last slide. Go to the next one. That is it. So you can click
good.
back, Pablo, in case they want to look at something else. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. Nice presentation, good report. Tough report this year with everything that went on. It's kind of like, how do you make sense of it? Yeah, we'll have to go forward, then look back to see how it all plays out. Questions for Hillary? I see Bill's hands up. Anybody else after Bill? I'll start with Bill. Go ahead, Mr. Sheeler.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off by saying I know it seems lost in the dust of history at this point, but just how strong everything was coming back after having really hit bottom recently. So it's unfortunate that this change has occurred, but I just wanted to acknowledge just how strong things were looking at that point in time. Great job by everybody. Does anybody have, my understanding is that the schools are going to be going back possibly in January. And I know there was that issue about school start times. If maybe somebody could address that one. And then I also wanted to just mention, my understanding is that UCSB is not even considering opening until April at the earliest.
So with regards to Santa Barbara Unified, so junior highs and high schools, their board did vote last week to come back both for elementary and secondary January 19th. Now, of course, that's what we know now. That's what the plan is now. There's like 3 lifetimes between now and mid-January, of course, in pandemic terms. So we're working very closely with the school district. I'm sure they're tired of me by now, but basically being in close communication about what their bell schedule is going to look like and all that. I'm told that we will have a firm answer. Excuse me. We'll have a firm answer by tomorrow. Wow. Or on tomorrow, basically, with regards to basically 2 things. What day of the week, because they'll be coming back in a hybrid fashion, probably, 2 cohorts, things like that. For junior highs and high schools, we're not as concerned with elementary. Well, we know elementary school kids take buses. It's certainly not enough to overwhelm our service. But what day of the week will they not be on campus? There's been talk about being Wednesday or Monday or Friday, because when you split kids into 2 cohorts, there's 5 days of the week, and you gotta figure something out that way. So that's the thing we need to know. The other thing we need to know is start times and end times. What's the bell schedule? Generally, high school. I mean, in the past, high schools start first and get out second, and junior highs start second and get out first, like earlier. I understand that might be switching and the times might be changing, which of course changes our booster times, which of course changes how all of the drivers' work is structured. So we are in planning getting very good at just doing about 1 million scenarios and hoping that one of them matches reality. So I really want to thank our planning team, especially Mark and Jennifer, for just rolling with it. And it's really made them a really sharp team. They were before, but now having to redo everything about, I don't know how many scenarios we've had since early March, probably almost 20. And so I really want to thank them for all their work that they've done and that they'll continue to do. And I just keep apologizing, saying, you know, I wish I knew what the what the answer was, but it's, you know, we're not calling the shots at this point, either with school times or with what the pandemic does. So
Thank you for that. I know we're getting close to some sort of resolution, and hopefully it'll work out as best as possible. The last question I have, and I guess later on I just had some comments. The last question talks in the staff report about variables that affect a line's on-time performance. And it talks about heavy congestion, and we know that was really a factor at the Stork-Hollister intersection, that certain things had to be retimed because of that. I noticed that congestion and looks like vehicle miles traveled and level of service have all changed since the pandemic, and that there's not nearly as much congestion. Is any of that borne out in kind of the on-time values we're now seeing in comparison to the way that it was in March, early March?
I would say it's certainly helped, though. Vehicle miles traveled and traffic are just bouncing back rather healthily, I would say. Well, it's not healthy for us for higher VMT, but you know, traffic's starting to come back. But it certainly helps when there's a lot less people on the road, I will say. Yeah, absolutely. I think that helped. But if you look at our third quarter numbers and our second quarter numbers, we were actually pretty close to what this OTP is in the end of the year. So it certainly helped, but it, you know, I think also just fewer people on the road, fewer accidents, or, you know, traffic collisions, fewer street closures, and things like that. So all of those things helped make this better, but I think the heaviest lift was our schedule work.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Chuck, Ms. McCory.
Yeah, I've asked this before and my memory fails me. The system-wide measurement, is that when buses return to the transit center?
No, it's based on every time point. So every time point of every trip of every line, it's measured, you know, whether they're on time. And again, the way we measure on-time performance is if something is more than 5 minutes late or more than 5 minutes past the scheduled time, it's late. If it's more than a minute early, it's early. So we measure earlies and lates here. And something that we've done that we, you know, really worked with our drivers to do in the past year too is to eliminate earlies, because those are, you know, 100% preventable. So, but it's every time point, Chuck.
So every time point within our, what, 800 and some odd bus stops, that must be a huge calculation to do that measurement. Do you have some sort of a program that does that?
Yeah, thankfully the Clever Devices system does all that hard math for us. So it crunches the numbers and spits out a report, which is great. So yeah, it's not every bus stop, but it's every time point.
Time point,
obviously,
right.
we have hundreds of those. So.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, are there any other questions before I go to public comment? Director Tabor.
Yeah, I wanted to thankfully we had the Q4 numbers in there because it really helped me wrap my mind around what's going on now. So that was really important to see. I liked the chart at the beginning too, because it really showed how quickly we made some really tough decisions and demonstrated our commitment to our drivers' health and the public safety at large. Two very important goals for us. Two questions. How has Easy Lift been affected? Do we have an idea of what their ridership has been?
Yeah,
Sure.
I've had a few conversations with Director Paredes. They were tracking similar to us, and including in the recovery phase. Through these past few months, we've had conversations, and it seemed like they were seeing improvement each week as we go. I'd say if we were at 70%, my record, they may have been around 60% in that neighborhood reduction, but they've been impacted similarly.
Thanks. And do we have a general idea of the timing for getting our driver barriers installed?
Yes, we've contracted with Complete Coach Works. We have a tentative schedule. It looks like it'll take us through the end of the calendar year into maybe the first week of January or so. We're hoping they can do a little bit better. We're seeing what we can do to get it done by the end of the calendar year, but it's likely going to run into the first or second week of January to complete the entire diesel fleet. We will be looking at the BYD fleet as well to see what we can do.
Great. Other questions or questions at this point? Okay, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments at this time.
Good, thank you very much. Board comments. Bill, you mentioned you had some comments, and then Paula. Let me go to Paula. She hadn't had a chance to say anything. Director Perotti.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank, first of all, Hillary, great report. Thank you so much. And just thank everybody at MTD for staying on top of this and continuing to look at all the possibilities moving forward. It's a lot of uncertainties, and it will continue to be some uncertainties. And I think MTD is doing a fabulous job. And as far as just a comment on traffic, I am hearing from several businesses in Goleta that, where they thought they wouldn't be able to do virtual meetings or at home, having their workers work from home remotely, they're finding out that it is possible. So my hope is that maybe they'll have, moving forward, they'll have some staggered schedules for their employees so that we can continue to have not so much traffic, especially at Stork and Hollister. That would be great if it would stay this way. So that's my goal, is that we can, it's something I've been an advocate for a long time, is having employers really stagger their employees to be able to work remotely. And now they're finding out actually they can, and it's working. So I know we are at City Hall finding out that it does work. So that's all I have, but good job. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Excellent comment. Excellent strategy too. Director Sheeler, you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. And the fact that we were just talking about strategies kind of is where I want to end when I'm done with my comments here. The first thing, even before the pandemic, there was a major emphasis on alternative transportation. And this was at the state level, the regional, and at the local level. These are all priorities in land use planning, was emphasis on improving alternative transportation. What we have learned since the pandemic is it's been kind of illuminated for us, things that we kind of knew but weren't able to quantify, is the number of transit dependent riders and how many of them are really essential workers. And I think it's important for decision makers to understand these two things, that alternative transportation on the South Coast largely refers to MTD. And we talk about essential workers, and that again refers to MTD. The next thing I wanted to bring up was the ending of the CARES funding. This is keeping us from staggering and falling on our knees. But that has an end date to it. And what is the plan after that? There's going to be massive reductions in revenue unless there's something to fill the voids. The last thing I wanted to mention is there a value in creating some sort of strategy to address the different scenarios that could ensue with our partners who espouse emphasis on alternative transportation and need to support services for essential workers? It seems like MTD might consider garnering support from our constituency through information sharing with our colleagues.
Jared, do you want to pick up as much as you can at this point, but just point the direction on where we might be handling most of those items in the future?
Certainly. Again, we'll be bringing a financial update, and that'll give you an idea of how we're tracking with the CARES Act funding, which we were trying to stretch into about 18 to 24 months. We're 7 or 8 months into it now, but we need to start planning probably early next year when we're working on our budget for fiscal year. That'd be 21, 22. I think we'll have a better handle on where we are and how long before we'll see the impacts of the loss of the care or the exhaustion of the CARES funding. So I'd say early next year, as we're preparing the budget process, you'll get a clear picture of the finances. The other item that we're waiting on, which is unfortunate, is the results for us of the census and the impact that'll have on our federal operating assistance, which is even before the pandemic, we were looking at about a $2 million loss of operating revenue. So that's likely still going to occur too. So there's also a lot of questions, I think, about what's going to happen with federal funding in the long run as a result of all of this. We're not alone. Transit across the entire country is facing this, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out, what happens with transportation funding next year. So I think it's a little bit soon for us now to get started on that, but early next year, as we start working on the budget process, is I think when we'll start addressing that. And there'll be some difficult decisions about which services survive, quite frankly, depending on what we can do on the revenue side.
I was just going to say, this is sobering information, and there's things called priming the pump. And without getting too far out ahead of it, I think it's important that our partners understand the degree of difficulty that we're entering into sooner than later.
Agreed. And I think we also keep in mind that the state and local governments a lot of them locally didn't receive CARES Act funding. And it's going to be a really difficult conversation. And again, another reason why I'm very interested in what comes out of Washington over the next 6 months, let's say.
Thank you.
Good question. Good points. Okay, no other questions. I'm going to move the agenda forward because while we're sitting here talking about what happened to us right now, question is, how do we get people back on the bus? And Hillary, I wanted to compliment you and Jerry on putting these items back to back, because as I was reading the first report, I thought, how do we get people back? And then I go right into the second report. So item 8, community survey results, health and safety commitments campaign. Mr. Estrada, Ms. Blackerby.
Yeah, I'm going to hand this off to Hillary so we can jump right into it and get into the discussion.
All right. Hang on one sec. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay. All right, so yes, this is what we're going to be talking about today. Our community survey results, the APTA Health and Safety Commitments campaign and program, and then we'll take questions. But first, a community survey. I'll talk about how we conducted it, when, if, like I said, time is a blur, so I'll remind you when we had that out in the field, who responded, and what did they say. So our methodology and outreach, the survey opened June 29th, 2020 to July 19th, 2020. So just to kind of set the stage a little of what was going on at that time. We had been doing a pretty good job getting numbers down in the county, or they'd been going down. And then bits of the economy started to open up in late June and early July. And then if you'll recall, we had a spike in our county, our community, frankly, across the state. And it was kind of the 4th of July explosion after that. And so this is, just remember, this is a moment in time. This is a snapshot in time of how people were feeling at that time. We did an online survey in English and Spanish. We didn't have any hard copy surveys this time. We often do with our surveys, but you can imagine why we didn't want to be handing things out and taking them back from people. It was promoted via our social media, other, partner agencies, email distribution through, I know the cities of Goleta and Santa Barbara sent it out to their full email list. Then when you went to our website, before you could go to what you want, I know we all hate these, but they're really effective. A splash thing would pop up saying, hey, we want to hear from you. So you could click on that to take the survey. And then we had at most of our bus stops a flyer that had a QR code, which is the little code that you can take a picture of with your phone, and it opens up the webpage with survey. And we targeted both riders and non-riders. We wanted to hear from people who were currently riding the bus, of course, people who generally do but weren't now, and then also people who don't. We wanted to hear what their thoughts were. So who responded? We had really good response, 935 people. Considering it was open for about 3 weeks, that's definitely the most kind of per week we've gotten on any so far. You probably have realized over the past 4 years, I really like surveys. We've done several of them, and I think we're getting better at it, both with survey design and how we get the word out. Of those 934, 46 responded to the Spanish survey. The surveys were identical, of course, just in a different language. Obviously, I wish that there were more of those responses, but I will say that that's the highest response rate of any of our Spanish surveys that we've had since I've been here. I don't even think they were done in Spanish before, about 4 years ago. And so I think we're getting better at it, but obviously we have a long way to go for that. And then obviously of some people who take the survey in English are bilingual, but we assume the ones in Spanish are often monolingual Spanish speakers, which is a significant percentage of our riders. So we want to make sure we're continuing to do everything we can to reach out to the population. So of the people who responded, 58.5% of respondents were not currently riding at that time, but 41.5% were. So we did get a good picture of people who are not currently riding, which is good. When you answered the survey, the first question was, are you currently riding MTD buses or are you not? And if you said you were, it took you down a certain funnel of questions. Many of them were the same towards the end. And if you were not currently riding, we'd ask, why not? How much did you ride before? Things like that. So for the people who are riding, that's who we'll talk about first. How often are they riding? And you'll see this sort of green gradient in a few different slides. The lighter green, the sort of spring green, is daily. And then as it gets darker, it's less frequent. So 2 to 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a month, and once a month or less. Daily, of the people who were riding, 35% were riding daily. And then another 31.8 were riding 2 to 3 times a week. So that's, about 66%, 2/3, were riding multiple times a week. How often were they riding before? So of the people who were riding at that time, how often were they riding before? And it was significantly more, right? I think a lot of us have learned to sort of bundle our trips and, really only go out if necessary, or not, people weren't socializing at this point, thankfully. So we see in this, of the people currently riding during the pandemic, half of them were riding daily before, as opposed to 35%. And then 25 were riding 2 to 3 times a week. So in the one I just showed was 2/3, and this one is basically 3/4. Were riding at least a couple times a week. So if they're riding, where were they going? And this is a question where you could select all that apply. Not everybody is just doing one thing on the bus, though some do. And you can see this is a percentage. So of the people who responded to this, who were currently riding the bus, almost 60% were saying they were going to work. But then a lot of people, about 50%, were going to groceries or the bank. We assume most of those are groceries. And then medical appointments and pharmacy visits, about 40%. There were still some people going to school. We didn't ask where. Still people going to school on the bus at that time. And then it just totally depended. So a lot of different things, going to take care of my mom, or going to pick things up, or my car was in the shop, or things like that. What kind of work are these people doing? So we asked, if you're taking the bus now, are you an essential worker? And 46% of those people who were taking the bus said they were essential workers. It's not a huge surprise to us, but it is a great reminder of how important our riders are, not just to us, but to the community. And so the fact that 6% of just people who responded were essential workers and are essential workers is important. And this pie chart shows the different essential industries that the federal government designates. And you can see 26.9% of them worked in food service or grocery, and a matching 26.9 were in healthcare, right? So that's over 50% were either feeding us or keeping us healthy. And then you can see there's a broad cross-section of other industries. So transportation, communications, IT, community services or volunteers, financial services. So pretty significant, but if you think about, some of the only things that were open in large part as food service or grocery and healthcare. So again, it really, I don't think can be overstated how vital our riders are to our existence, not as a transit agency, but as a community, both really. So if they're not riding, why not? So then this is that other piece of the pie of people who were not riding the bus at the time that they took the survey. And 44.2% said it was for COVID-19 related reasons. And those were not just like, are you scared of COVID-19? But people, they said they had lost their job, or they were working from home, or they, have they're immunocompromised, things like that. Reasons why they weren't going out. It's a lot of different things. And this includes people who never ride the bus anyway. So it's sort of, I'll show you the numbers on that. You'll see this group, we talked to a lot of people who they weren't taking it anyhow. So this is, again, these same colors like we showed with the riders, and these were the non-riders. Prior to now, how often did you ride the bus? Only 9.6% of them were doing, 9.6% were doing it daily. 33% were doing it never. 30.9% was once a month or less. So you can see this is sort of the reverse. Almost 2/3 either never take it or take it really rarely. But we've got 9.6% we're taking it daily. 14.1 we're taking it 2 to 3 times a week, and then 12.3 we're taking it 2 to 3 times a month. So these are the people who weren't taking it. They're generally not regular bus riders. So you can see in this. The other question we asked these folks is when the orders lift, and so we said when state and local, county public health orders are lifted, which that was a little vague, and I think a lot of us didn't even know, like, what kind of orders can they place? We kind of didn't know. They could just tell us to stay in our house, or all the other requirements of closing businesses and things like that. But when orders lift, when will you feel comfortable returning to transit? So 40% said, I don't know. And I think a lot of us in the early part of this, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so that's not surprising. 21.2% said they'll feel comfortable when there's a vaccine. And again, these are the people who are not currently riding. 14.8% said immediately. And then the rest of the pie is, within 2 to 3 weeks to over a year. But 40% didn't know. That's fair. But 21% did say that they'd be waiting until there's a vaccine. Okay, so just to explain what this chart is like, I sort of struggled to show it in the best way. It's kind of hard to show, but when orders lift, which improvements, this is people not currently riding, which improvements are likely to encourage you to ride in the future? And so this is like number of respondents basically, and I'll read the things at the bottom. Cleaning and disinfecting, capacity limits, so limiting so that there's, an attempt at physical distancing on the bus, more frequent service, amenities like Wi-Fi, and then other. And so there's a lot of different things, and other people were able to write out what they meant by other. I've mentioned it in the staff report. But cleaning and disinfecting, no surprise, is absolutely the most important thing to people. And so we've been doing it, but here in a couple slides, I'll show you now, starting today, we're going to be showing people that we're doing it and talking to people about how we're doing it. But more frequent service, again, not rocket science. This is, in pandemic or not, a really popular thing with people who either take the bus or are considering taking the bus. If you have more frequent service, they're more likely to ride.
Laura, I think it's just a comment. I was interested to see that the capacity limit was so high that in fact people recognize it.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little.
I was interested to see that the capacity limits really was recognized as a strategy by these people that they basically value.
Yeah, and the way that the capacity limit answer was, or what it said limiting capacity on the bus to allow for physical distancing. So we didn't put like a number in there or anything, but people wanted some space was basically what they told us. And then this is numbers. This is for everyone, and so this is for current riders and also people not riding at the time of survey. So we gave them this list of things and said, is this very important, important, somewhat important, not important, blah, 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 that sort of ranking system. And so the items we asked them about were, enhanced cleaning and disinfecting of the buses, mandatory face coverings, capacity limits, keeping folks informed of service changes, more frequent service, mobile fare payment, and onboard Wi-Fi. And again, people were ranking each one, so it's not like they had to pick one. But again, cleaning and disinfecting, not surprising. That's up in the 90s, 93%. Requiring face coverings of all passengers and bus operators, 90%. Limiting the number, capacity was 85%. Keeping riders informed of service changes, 85%. More frequent service was 69%. And then the ability to pay your fare directly with your smartphone or credit or debit card, 62%. And onboard Wi-Fi, sort of that outlier, but any chance I get, I just want to see what people are thinking. So that was 35%, said it was important or very important. Doesn't mean they wouldn't like it, but when you compare it with cleaning and disinfecting, it's not really a competition. So what does this tell us, right? It tells us that obviously, excuse me, people want to know they're safe on the bus. Cleaning and disinfecting, really important. Face coverings, making sure that people aren't, sharing their droplets, very important, both for employees and for our riders to do so. And then, making sure they've got enough, physical space between them and other riders on the bus. That is what was important to people in June. And I will say, we mandated face coverings on our buses as of May 1st. The county didn't mandate them, sort of everywhere else, and including on public transit until I think mid to late June. It might have been June 20th, I think. So we were ahead of the curve there, but when people were being surveyed, it had just become a requirement in the county. So what are we? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought
Okay.
you were done.
So what are we doing to address this? We've been doing a lot of things to address it since February, actually, with regards to cleaning. And as we've learned more and as science has learned more, we've been incorporating that into our practices. Our Director of HR and Risk and Chief Safety Officer, Mary Gregg, has been leading this up very ably and has been doing a great job with all the different players. It's a tremendous amount of work, but she's been making it happen. This is, we want to kind of tie it up with a bow and have this guiding, these guiding principles And so what the American Public Transportation Association, or APTA, which we are a member of, created for the transit industry, actually in North America, is this health and safety commitments program. And we are a participating system. General Manager Estrada signed the pledge. And basically it comes down to 4 core categories of responsibility. And it's really built around the transit agency has a responsibility and our riders have a responsibility. And you can't do one without the other. We both have to work together to be successful and to keep folks safe. So those 4 principles or those categories are following public health guidelines from official sources, which we do obviously through county and state and CDC. And those things change all the time, but we're changing with them. Protecting each other by requiring face coverings and other protection. Obviously, we provide PPE for our employees, and we require face coverings of our passengers. And with the installation of driver barriers, that'll go even further. Keeping passengers informed and empowered to choose the safest times and routes to ride. Some agencies have the ability to show real-time loads. We're not quite there yet, but we are trying to keep people, we're boosting service. And so that's how we're addressing this, trying to make sure that at the busiest times, we're sending a bus along behind if we can. And then putting health first by requiring riders and employees to avoid transit if they feel ill or if they've been exposed to COVID-19. And so on each one of our buses, by the back door, there's a decal that says, if you have any of these symptoms, do not board this bus. Our employees know very well, if you have any symptoms, don't come in, just call. And if you've been exposed, be in touch through the proper channels. And so these are all things that it takes 2 to tango, right? The transit agency, we're doing our work. We need our passengers to help as well. So in rolling that out, which we'll be doing today, this afternoon, we need to let everybody know about it. And we want to build that confidence. I think people know we're probably doing something, but they don't know what it is necessarily, and they're not seeing it, right? They're not here in the yard every night when they see our utility crew and the cleaning crew just work so diligently to make sure that the vehicles are safe. They don't see everything that our drivers are doing. So we want to show them so that we can invite them back, now, but also when we have enough capacity to carry everyone. And so we're going to be rolling this out. Another great thing that APTA did was they did a lot of the design work for us. And so they produced editable content for social media, for printing, that we're going to be rolling out here in the next little bit. So you'll be seeing buses, you'll be seeing ads on the outside and inside of the buses with this information. You'll be seeing it on our social media, and we'll also be sending a press release out this afternoon so that we can get the word out. And with that, I want to have the world debut of a video that we put together that we're going to be sharing with the community later today about what we've been up to. So with that, let me know if you can't hear once I play, but the audio should be working. And it's just a couple minutes long.
"2020 has been remarkably challenging. Almost everything about our daily lives has changed. How we work, who we see, and how we get around. As we all adapt to constant changes, Santa Barbara MTD is here to get you where you need to go. We're proud that MTD has kept running through it all, getting essential workers to their jobs to keep our community running. We maintain full service levels on some of our most popular lines because we know you rely on them to get you where you need to go safely. At the end of every day, when businesses close and other workers are heading home, our employees continue their essential work, keeping the bus fleet safe and clean. Our mechanics, service, and utility personnel work through the night, cleaning and disinfecting, maintaining vehicles, and performing safety checks. Just as our service and employees are essential, you, the rider, are essential as well. We take our responsibility to keep everyone safe and healthy very seriously, and that's why we're participating in the American Public Transportation Association Health and Safety Commitments Program. We've joined public transit agencies from across the country in committing to making every ride safer. We've enhanced our standard cleaning protocols. Every day on every vehicle that goes out into service, we use hospital-grade disinfectants on all high-touch surfaces inside the bus, using the latest technology and best practices in the transit industry. We've limited the capacity on our buses to encourage physical distancing. As more of you have come back to ride, we are ramping up our service, boosting certain trips on the lines we see the most demand for, such as those lines serving the east-west of Santa Barbara, State Hollister Corridor, and intercity service between Santa Barbara and Carpinteria. New barriers are being installed on buses that will help protect our drivers, reinstate front door boarding, and allow us to collect much-needed fares again. We're doing our part, but we can only succeed if you do your part as well. As the economy continues to reopen and ridership increases, social distancing may not always be possible, and your help will be more important than ever. Face coverings are required on all MTD vehicles and at the transit center and bus stops. Try to avoid sitting next to another passenger. Limit conversation, sneeze or cough into your elbow, and if you're feeling sick, please stay home. Our region is no stranger to disaster and emergency, but when we come together and everyone does their part, we come out stronger on the other side. We can do that again. I'm Jerry Estrada, General Manager of Santa Barbara MTD. On behalf of the 200 employees that work here at MTD, welcome back and welcome aboard.
All right. So with that, always kind of, I've watched it a lot of times. I always get a little choked up. So with that, it's to the board and questions.
Good for you, Ms. Rodriguez.
Great video, great video. Answered a lot of the questions that I had written down. And Jerry's voice is very nice, very nice. Thank you, Jerry. And I'm glad it's coming from him and it's coming from the top. And I think that it lets the public know that, you know, the top does know what's going on. It's not, you know what I'm saying, that the whole agency is on board, no pun intended. But what do we do as passengers, like get on and off? Is there like, are they out in service for an hour or two and then they come in to be cleaned? Is it just cleaned at night, or how often is the you know, because people are coming on and off, right? And they're touching surfaces. How is that working now?
Yeah, that's being handled each evening as every vehicle comes back into the facility, is how we're taking care of that. It's something as we increase the number of people that are allowed on board, we may take a look at and see if there's something we can do. That's a big challenge for every transit operator around the country. Yeah, but something we'll address as the physical distancing issue as we move forward, and essentially the risk level improves in the area and we bump up the number of people allowed on board a bus. That's the time we're going to need to take a stronger look at that, or a closer look.
And the other thing that go ahead.
Do we have sanitizers getting onto the bus, or any kind of wipes or anything like that to assist, like when you go to the store or anything?
Well, remember, we have at peak, typically we have about 90 buses out in service during a weekday. And it's going to take a lot of coordination, quite frankly. And it's something we're committed to looking at and doing everything we reasonably can to keep people safe. So it's certainly something we'll take a look at.
And what I was going to say is, obviously we ask that our passengers do the thing that the, you know, public health professionals have been yelling at us to do for 7 months now, which is, you know, wash your hands. If you can't, use hand sanitizer, don't touch your face. And, you know, if everyone's keeping their face covering on in the bus, you know, it should be still a fairly safe area.
Yeah. Last question on that. If a driver or a passenger believes that there's a person there and they're coughing or they look sick, do we immediately take them off? What do we do? What's our protocol on that?
Yeah,
especially going into flu season now. And you know what? Do they have the flu? Do they have COVID? Do they have neither? You know, some people have issues with their lungs and they just cough. and there's nothing wrong, but they've got lung issues when, the air hits them, or it's too cold, or it's too hot. Do we have any protocol at all for that?
What we have is the face covering requirement, for everyone that's on board, the driver and the passenger. Obviously, it's a difficult situation for our drivers. They've got to make that, that judgment call if they feel that somebody's unsafe. The way we've handled face coverings, for example, is we try to treat it like a safety issue. If someone's refusing to wear one, it's a safety matter, and the driver has the ability to call in a supervisor, stop the vehicle, and have it dealt with. So it's a challenge for sure. And I think as we head into flu season, it's going to be even more difficult. But we're going to support our employees when they make those decisions, and that's our commitment to them and to our customers, keeping them safe. So we'll support our folks if they feel that there's something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Good job. It's a wonderful PSA. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jerry.
Other comments? Bill, Mr. Sheeler?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the survey. It was very interesting and valuable. And I'm not sure when you plan to do it again, but it's nice to start to build a library of these responses. You used the phrase to build confidence, and that's truly what it comes down to. I would love to be able to take my grandson on the bus, but right now I'm not confident enough to do that. I thought it was interesting to see the number of respondents to the survey who said that they do not use MTD much or at all in normal times. So I guess that could be some interest of potential ridership in the future if there's confidence, when there's confidence. And then the last one, the number of Spanish responses, I was just trying to brainstorm maybe a way of maybe helping that in the future increase. I'm talking about this Zoom generation of these kids now that are all very computer fluent, and they can share information with their parents who may not be computer fluent and who may not even know that MTD is trying to do a survey and would like their responses. So I'm just wondering if there's any way to work with the school districts when it's time to do another survey to see if somehow, whether that goes out in the Friday folders or somehow that can be folded in with Safety Town or whatever, just to try and increase the number of Spanish respondents, and by using the children as the vehicle to get that accomplished.
Yeah, it's something that we can definitely do. Obviously, us asking something of the school district this past summer was going to be really hard. So, but I totally understand in the future for, our surveys, whatever they're on, they survey their, families all the time, but that's definitely something that we can take a look at. And also, doing more outreach on radio and things like that. It was just something that, at that time in June, I think a lot of them hadn't gotten up and going with sort of remote people, doing interviews that way, but it's something that we can always improve, and those are great ideas.
Okay. Any other questions or comments of Hillary at this point? Well, Hillary, I again, everyone's already said, great report, timely, right on target. It really basically gives
really hard to hear you, Chair Davis.
Yeah. Any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try this too. Okay, I'm gonna try to be louder. Anyway, I was just complimenting you again on the timing. It's great information. Just basically
You're too low to hear again.
Okay.
But that's better when you lean back. It might be something with the cord.
Okay. How's that?
Better.
Okay. I'm just going to not move for the next half hour. I want to thank you for the report. Great timing. It fits right in, and it answers the questions we have going forward. And we'll look forward to seeing the PFA.
Thank you.
Okay. If you guys can you still hear me? Yeah. So. Okay. Dave, you may take the meeting. I may go out and come back in. Okay. Take the meeting.
Vice
Dave?
Chair Tabor, I think Chair Davis is asking you to chair the meeting while he gets the technology squared away.
Yeah, it's not that you're too low, Mr. Chair. It's you're coming in and out. You usually start pretty strong and then it kind of starts breaking up. So, okay, I'd heard there are no more comments or questions on this item. I think we're ready to move along to item number 9, annual election of board officers. How do we wish to proceed?
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, so I'm off the mic, so maybe it was my mic. Okay, so we're on item 9, annual election of officers. So I look for a motion or a recommendation on election of officers. Any nominations?
Chair Davis,
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a comment. First of all, my term is going to be up next year, and I did not reapply, and I will not be reapplying. So I will not be requesting to have any board assignments until that, any new assignments until the end of my term. Thank you. And sorry.
Thank you. And I think we will want to come back at another time and address your service to the board because it's been invaluable for such a long period of time. We will miss you dearly, but like I say, we'll have another time to basically recognize that service. So thank you for that, for letting us know and putting it out on the record.
Thank you.
Anyone want to make a nomination? Ms. McQuarrie. Unmute. There you go. Go ahead, Chuck.
I'd like to keep the board as is, the officers.
Paul, is that a second? Okay, seconded by Perotti.
Yeah.
Mr. Tabor, Mr. Sheeler, you're willing to continue to serve?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, I'll start at the top. Perotti, Director Perotti,
Aye, yes.
Director McClory,
Yes.
Director Rodriguez,
Yes.
Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and I will vote yes also. It would be my honor, very frankly. I know it's the same for Dave and for Bill to serve you guys and keep our team going. We got a great team here. And let me know at any time if I can help you do your jobs as board members any better. So I'm always open to hearing back from you guys in that regard. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 10, the general manager's report. Mr. Estrada?
Yes, I'll be brief. One item that I included were 2 tables to give you a feel for the average weekday ridership currently versus prior year. And it shows you each month, April, May, June, July, August, September that we've completed. And you can see the steady increase in ridership from about 4,300 rides on an average weekday in April to 7,200 in September. And with behind it, you see what that translates into versus prior year decrease, where it was immediately an 83% drop. And we're currently around a 68% drop in September, as we're matching against prior year figures, which would include student ridership, city college, K through 12. UCSB typically hits a little bit more in October. So it'll be reflected there. Now, figure 2 in the report, what I did there was I backed out of the prior year numbers those routes that are currently suspended, and we have a number of them, and also the student ridership, UCSB, City College, just to kind of give you a feel for our general base ridership and how we're performing. And there you see the decrease immediately in May was 52%. The ridership doesn't change this year, obviously, but the comparison does. And we're about 34% below prior year of what's remaining route for route and essentially the groups. Now, obviously, we expect to see a decline even in student ridership when it returns, not just because of the limitation on boarding and how many people we have on the bus, but we just think there'll be enrollment will be a little bit slower, a little bit lower, maybe at UCSB City Colleges. They maybe gradually bring students back in as well. And I think at the K through 12, it'll be some time before we see the kind of the level of ridership that we saw before, because that used to be extremely high, and it'll take some time to return. Beyond that, on the general manager's report, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that was really the one point I wanted to share with the board.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Strada? Mr. Sheeler, Director Sheeler, Bill?
Thanks again, Chair. Maybe I dreamt this, and I can't find it again in the report that I was looking at. It has to do with the microtransit and the kind of vans that were going to be purchased. And originally the specifications were calling for vans that would be using renewable diesel. And I guess somehow that's kind of gotten sidetracked a bit. And then did I read somewhere that as a result of that, there's now state certified electric vehicles that serve the same need that we might be considering?
Yes, and that's where we are today. There was a challenge in acquiring the diesel engine vehicles that we could use renewable diesel with. So now we're at a point where things have progressed to the point where we feel get a transit vehicle or a Ford Transit vehicle that can be converted to essentially electric and also upgraded to include the ADA equipment that we need.
In your opinion, is this actually a better outcome, or are you disappointed that we couldn't get the diesels?
I think it'll be a better outcome, I hope. I mean, we haven't seen the vehicle yet, we haven't run it, but on the surface, at least big picture, I think it's more in line of where we're heading.
And is there the charging capacity now that this unanticipated change is occurring?
Yeah, one of the things we did was when we installed on the light duty charge ready program, we had 14 ports installed and we purchased 10 Chevy Bolts. Now we could purchase 4 more Chevy Bolts and go a little bit further with relief vehicles, but actually I prefer to use them for these vehicles for now, and then we can go out and have additional ports added to the facility if necessary when we want to expand the relief fleet as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that I asked that question and got those answers. And the last one on the very last pages of your last 2 paragraphs of your general manager's report, it talks for calls for projects and transit projects. What kind of things might MTD be soliciting support for?
Those are likely to be capital projects. I'm looking at our facility improvements. We desperately need additional capital funds to make the improvements at Terminal 2 for recommissioning and fleet replacement, quite frankly. Those are at the top of the list, at least to come to my mind immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Director Rodriguez.
I'm sorry, but I need to leave. I need to exit the meeting. I have to get my car brakes repaired.
Yeah, no, we totally understand. Hope everything goes well with you, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Give me a call if you need to be briefed on anything, but we'll go into executive session. We'll come back next time with the same executive session. No action will be taken today.
Okay, I've reviewed the document. We can talk later. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Have
Bye-bye.
a safe trip.
Thank you. Let me try to get out of here.
Down where it says leave meeting.
Yep, I said I did it, but it didn't take me out. Didn't leave.
There you go. Okay. Not hearing any other questions on the general manager's report takes us to other business and reports. The only thing I have to report is on the Calle Real. Jerry had mentioned previously, but I'll just reemphasize. We've extended the deadline for the receipt of the applications or the proposals to Friday at 2 o'clock, this Friday at 2 o'clock. And it does show basically, at least from what we've heard, a lot of great interest in the community relative to submitting. So we're looking forward to some good proposals. So when next time we meet, we'll obviously have something to talk about. Anything else from any of the other board or committees at this point? Not seeing any. Okay, that takes us to item 12. This is a recess to closed session Public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code Sections 54957 and 54954, subsection 5E, to evaluate the performance of the district's general manager. Madam Clerk, is there anyone who wishes to speak under public comment?
There are no comments at this time.
Okay. At this point, we will go into closed session. So what we need to do is close off the live YouTube and the recording session, and I will reconvene the meeting at the end of the closed session. Is that possible there, Christina?
That is, so what will happen is I'll pause and stop the recording, transfer host rights to Chair Davis, who will then take over the meeting, and all of us staff will leave. And then we'll do the reverse when we come back.
Great, excellent, that works. Okay, so for the public, we will be recessing into closed session.